Ice, braces, and rest are not enough to get over wrist pain. In this video, I'm going to show you everything I know about wrist pain and strengthening your wrists so you can get back to playing your guitar. Virtually every other video I watched on this topic skips over how to strengthen your wrists and prevent injury in the first place. Up front, I have to tell you that I'm not any kind of certified exercise specialist, but all the exercises that I'm about to show you were developed by myself in collaboration with my excellent chiropractor, Dr. E. Dr. E was a Division I college gymnast, so if there's anyone who's qualified to talk about high-performing wrists, it's definitely him. Dr. E helped me recover from my own wrist pain issues in just a couple of visits, and I haven't had a problem since. And again, while I'm not specifically exercise and exercise physiology, I am certified in functional diagnostic nutrition through Functional Diagnostic Nutrition program. There, I learned how to create natural healing protocols by interpreting lab work, using food and supplements to create natural healing protocols. And I'm going to be sharing some off the beaten path stuff that might really help you out with any kind of joint and wrist pain. I'm going to go through all the tools, how to use them, and then you can decide what works best for you. Now look, even if you don't have wrist pain right now, I really want you to stay and watch this video because everything I show is stuff that you can do as maintenance. So if you don't have any wrist pain right now, this is going to teach you how you can almost surely avoid it, because once you're conditioned, it literally only takes you a minute per day. That's how long I actually spend on this stuff. It's just kind of part of my practice routine. So with all of that out of the way, let's get to it. So the first step is obviously rest. If you're experiencing any kind of consistent pain, especially when you're not playing guitar, then you should take a break. I was actually experiencing pain in my wrist a couple months ago, and the idea of doing a push-up made me wince. So I avoided picking up certain things, and of course, practicing was pretty uncomfortable too. I got my break during the John Petrucci guitar camp. I was expecting to play a lot when I went, but I was actually happy just letting my wrists rest and attending the lectures. Altogether, that trip got me about a week off of guitar playing, and that was a major help. Now, according to another video I watched from a physical therapist, doing some playing during your rest time is completely fine, and that's what I did. By the way, if you want to see my full thoughts on the John Petrucci Guitar Universe experience, you can watch this live stream right here. Now, part of rest can include ice, painkillers, and braces, and we'll talk about painkillers in detail a little later, but right now I want to touch on braces. Braces are good, but I want you to be careful about relying on them. This is because the more time you spend in a brace, the more muscles atrophy. It's just like when you break a bone. So they're really important for more serious injuries, but not as much for more mild ones. Ace makes good little wraps like this, and if I'm having wrist pain, I find it convenient to take my painkiller at night and then just sleep with the brace on. The second step is to look for any obvious technique issues that would set you up for wrist pain. These include, but are not limited to, gripping the pick too hard, pressing the strings down too hard, the guitar is too low, the guitar is too high, the guitar is angled wrong, especially causing wrist pain, and the guitar action is too high, forcing you to use more force than you really need to in order to play. If your technique is not perfect here, I really recommend you watch my other video called How to Hold a Guitar Pick. And this video addresses everything with regard to the position of the guitar and the right hand. I also want to add some additional notes about posture here. It's good to mix up your position. Most of us play sitting down, hunched over the guitar, and depending on the weight of your guitar, you can also put some additional strain on your shoulders, neck, and back. You can counteract some of this just by playing in different positions. Try using a bar stool when you practice, then use a low chair, try with a strap, then try without a strap. Mix it up and have some fun. Now let's talk about the left hand, since my How to Hold a Guitar Pick video doesn't really address that. First off, you don't need to play everything in perfect classical position all the time. Some songs and parts will require that, but for the parts that don't, feel free to use anything that's more relaxed, even wrapping your thumb around. It's totally fine. And one thing that's getting really drilled into me by my teachers right now is that part of playing guitar in the professional world is how it looks too. You can get mad at me, but it's the truth. Back to your left hand though. Generally speaking, my thumb and my student's thumb typically land around or maybe even a little behind the first finger. The wrist should not come around too far, as this increases the wrist strain. It should just come at a natural position, maybe about right there. When it comes to the blues position and form bends, you should know that bends come from rotation. They don't come from pushing and pulling the strings with your fingers. And the essence of the blues position is absolutely not wrapping the thumb around the neck. You can totally do bends without it. Wrapping the thumb around the neck is a secondary result of performing bends properly. People love my video on the bends, and there's a good reason for it, and I highly recommend you watch it. I'll put a link right up here. All right, continuing troubleshooting the left hand, there's a couple points that you can optimize. Mainly that you shouldn't be stretching and reaching for notes. Shifting to play notes and optimizing the position you're playing a particular passage in is what's going to give you the best results. Just because the tab says to play it one way doesn't mean that you can't move the note to a new place where it's more comfortable to play for you. That said, I also encourage you to watch live performances of whatever you're working on and see how the artist does it so you can be as authentic as possible, and sometimes that gives you a lot of clues that tab doesn't. Next up, make sure the rotation of the fingers is correct and that you aren't shifting your hand all over the place to play tight passages. Look for places where all you need to do is move your fingers, not your hand, in fast, tight passages. This is going to help your speed too. So note how the finger and not the whole hand reaches for the next note instead of the hand rotating and stretching. This is a much more efficient way to play. And lastly, when it comes to the left hand, make sure your action is set comfortably. A big problem with many beginner and cheaper guitars, frankly, is that the action comes out of the box far too high. Yes, when you first start guitar, you do need to build some initial strength, but that'll come with time. And you can also just speed that up by optimizing the action of the guitar. Now there's lots of great setup videos out there on YouTube, but hit subscribe if you want to see me do my own video on how I set up guitars. Okay, with all of the causes and kind of obvious stuff of wrist pain out of the way, let's talk about some tools you can use to fix it. To sum up where we're at this point, you've either overused or injured your wrist in some way, and you have now completed a rest period. Now you're ready to strengthen the wrist. And this is the crux of this entire video. When you strengthen the wrist, you are less prone to injury. Please complete a rest period before using any of these strengthening tools or methods, or you can make things worse. I'm going to start with my favorite wrist strengthening methods, and then I'm going to progress to the stuff that I found least preferable. First up is something called the GyroBall. The GyroBall is what it says it is. It's a ball with a powerful gyro inside. You spin it up and it can create an incredible amount of resistance. This thing gives your wrist and your arm and your whole forearm a serious workout. You just move it like this for a couple seconds, minute, and you're good. Now, if you have wrist pain, don't shy away from this thing. If you need less resistance, just spin it more slowly. And if your wrists are feeling good, just spin it harder to get more resistance. Right now, I use the GyroBall for 30 seconds on each wrist at a high intensity before I commence practice. That's it. With the gyro, I don't stress about isolating the motions of the wrist, but you can do that if you really want to. Last note on the gyro, when I use it, I place the timer piece right on the balls of my index and middle finger knuckles. I make sure that those fingers are engaged in holding the tool, and I make sure that all of my fingers are kind of touching this ring right here because it's easy to hold it like this where your other fingers aren't as involved. So just make sure you do that. And by the way, this one comes with a timer. You don't have to get the one with the timer. In fact, my timer was broken out of the box, but because you're holding the tool, you can't even see it. So let's move up to my second favorite method, which is the exercise band. And this is what I started with. They're cheap, portable, and simple. You might already have one. And when you use the exercise band, start with a low resistance and then increase the strength as you heal. Now, my routine for the exercise band was, again, to use it right before I practice. I did 10 to 20 reps on every wrist motion. I just did down like this, and then I did up, and then I did side like that, and then reverse the hand and do the other side to get all 4 sides. It's very important when you're using weights or any other kind of dynamic resistance that you flex the initial movement and then you slowly release. You don't want to just flex slowly and then suddenly release the tension. And the way Dr. E explained it to me is that the slow relaxing of the muscle helps to break down more of the muscle fibers, and you're going to get a better build and more efficiency out of the exercise that you do. If you do the exercise band method, it's also really helpful to get one of these, which is like a doorstop kind of thing. If you don't have some kind of pole in your living area that you can wrap it around for good resistance for your wrist. Now, another tool favored among many is the TheraBand Flexbar. Flexbar is a rubber stick that you can use to practice a whole lot of different wrist motions. It comes with a guide for all kinds of exercises you can do with it. Personally, I found it was kind of hard to isolate the side-to-side motions of the wrist well, but I liked it for these up and down motions. The next thing I ordered for this video is something just called the wrist strength bar, and I barely use this thing at all. You can see it's still got the tag on it. This thing has really pretty high resistance. It's hard to adjust, and it kind of presses on your arm right here in a pretty uncomfortable way, and also on the wrist, and I really didn't like this tool. I don't recommend it. For wrist strengthening, you can also use weights if you really can't get your hands on any of these other tools above, which cost like $15 or less. But weights are just not as portable, convenient, or adjustable. You can, put your arm on some kind of bench and do like that, and do like that, and then do kind of a hammer curl type motion. I really highly recommend spending the $15 to get the GyroBall. It's even more portable than the Flexbar, and you don't need to use it for very long. You can isolate all the motions of the wrist, and it provides variable resistance based on how much input you give it, so you don't have to go get 3 different versions of it like with exercise bands or weights. Now let's talk about more tools and manual therapy. Along with all of your wrist strengthening tools, I highly recommend you see a chiropractor and massage therapist regularly. I generally see Dr. E once a week, and he adjusts my wrists as well as the rest of my body, like my back, and I usually get a massage about once a month. When you're looking for a chiropractor, I highly recommend seeking out a sports chiropractor or anybody who specializes in sports. Any licensed massage therapist is going to have a certification called an LMT, or licensed massage therapist, but the really great ones out there are the ones who do continuing education and even maybe develop their own methods and bring in some other kinds of therapy. On top of that, you can also use a simple massage gun to stimulate blood flow to your forearms. As far as I've read and listened, any one off Amazon will do just fine. Just note that a massage gun is not a replacement for a skilled massage therapist, and I wouldn't use it directly on the wrist. Now let's talk about some things to avoid. I would avoid any types of grip strengthening tools, especially if you're experiencing pain like right here in your wrist or anything along the lines of tennis elbow. Tennis elbow is actually caused by overtraining the muscles that close the hands because you're gripping a racket or whatever the whole time. And really that's kind of the same motion that we're doing when we play guitar or use computer keyboards. So if you're experiencing this kind of pain, you're gonna need to explore training your hands to move in the reverse direction, opening up. To do this, you can use a simple rubber band around the outside of your fingers and practice flexing outward, or you can get a bowl of rice, dive your hand in, expand it, pull it up, and then dive again with the hand closed. Remember, you want to isolate the opening of the hand, and the source for all of this information on the tennis elbow stuff is from Paul Chek. I'm going to link his original Instagram video below. Also, with regard to grip strength, you don't really need any of those silly devices. You've got the guitar, so just play it. And if you're really having trouble with bar chords, then cool, don't learn them first. The reason that a lot of guitar methods start with bar chords is simply because it's a great way to play many popular songs. But if you're watching this channel, chances are you like stuff that's more riff-based. So work on some riffs you like. Build up your hand strength, build up your familiarity with the guitar, and then work on the bar chords later. And one last note about the action thing. Yes, playing electric guitar is much easier than playing acoustic guitar, so maybe start there if you're just starting with guitar. Next up, I want to talk about stretching. There's a lot of videos out there that advocates for all kinds of stretching, but personally I find that stretching kind of aggravates my wrists. So I just use the GyroBall thing for 30 seconds, and then I have zero issues playing for more than 3 hours. None at all. That said, some people do find them helpful, so I wanted to give you a few notes here. The first one is static versus dynamic stretches. Static stretches are stretches that are held in place, whereas dynamic stretches are ones that come from motion. An example would be shaking your hands around versus pulling all of your fingers backwards to stretch the inside of the forearm. Static, dynamic. If you're going to stretch your hands, personally I find it more comfortable to start with the static stretches and then move to the dynamic stretches. Dynamic stretches are good for getting the very end range of your flexibility, but with static stretches you can control the overall tension a little bit better and target specific areas by accentuating different parts of the stretch, such as rolling your hand around out here to get more of the outside, or more on the index and middle fingers to get more of the inside. So let's go through some static and dynamic stretches. First one is thumb stretching. You can just pull your thumb down like this, like that. You can also do hand and wrist stretching by pulling your hand back like this, or even down inside like that. I really don't like that one. You can also do shoulder across stretching because shoulders are involved when playing the guitar. You can also do the shoulder over stretch like that. A nice one for opening up the back. And then there's some dynamic stretches. I gave them all silly names. So there's the shake it out, which is just kind of circles. You can do side to side like this, and then you can do up and down like that. And the reason I isolate those motions is because when we're playing guitar, we use this motion. We don't use a circle motion, so I prefer to use this. And then for opening up your shoulders, you can also rotate your arms in opposite directions, and that's a great way to open shoulders. I learned that in music conservatory from some type of music specialist. I forget who it was and what their name was. Sorry, but it's been a wonderful stretch. I still do it all the time. Last thing on stretches, you can also just kind of wave your arms forward and bring extra flesh blood, which will help bring out some of the cellular junk that builds up in the hands when you're working your muscles a lot. Now, I also wanted to spend just a minute on the psychology of injury in this video. Instead of using labels to describe any kind of specific injury you have, I encourage everybody to use generalized terms when referring to injury. Only use labels when you need to communicate with a medical professional. Here's why. First, labels don't actually communicate that much information. All itis means is inflammation of. So if you have tendonitis, it just says inflammation of the tendons, pain in your wrists. Well, yeah, you already knew that, right? And if you truly examine labels many times, they don't actually provide any extra information. Second, if you read virtually any personal development book, you'll run into this kind of concept where if you're saying, I am X, I have Y, I'm fighting Z, this language actually reinforces your present reality. Instead, I encourage you to use upgraded language, like, I have wrist pain today, or I'm experiencing some wrist pain right now. Don't give yourself labels you don't need. Now, let's talk about food, and this is where I get to flex all of my FDN training. And all of this is going to start with a little thought experiment. Why is it that when one person gets a bee sting, their throat closes up, and another person just feels pain, and then the third person gets hives? It's because all of our bodies have a unique response to inflammation. Inflammation from food can show up either as food allergies, which means there's a serious reaction, or a food sensitivity, which means there's a minor reaction. And the list of symptoms from these things is endless. Here's a list I pulled from the Cleveland Clinic. You could experience diarrhea, gas and bloating, heartburn, nausea, stomach pain, brain fog, fatigue, flushed skin, or even rosacea, itching, joint or muscle pain, guitarists, headaches and migraines, sneezing, or stuffy and runny nose. Inflammation can even take the form of behavioral disorders. As a kid, I had extreme focus and behavior issues. We did some allergy testing, we eliminated foods that I was sensitive, not allergic to, and there was a complete turnaround in my behavior. Pay very close attention if you experience any of these symptoms, and as we say in FDN land, common is not normal. The most common trigger foods for joint pain, according to my colleagues, which I polled, are gluten, nightshades like eggplant, tomatoes, bell peppers, and chilies. There's a bunch more lists you can find on the internet. Lectins, high oxalate foods, sugar, seed oils like canola and sunflower oil, which are unfortunately coating the vast majority of foods in supermarkets like granola and chips and all these kinds of things. And then, of course, dairy or casein specifically. Now, I know that sounds like a pretty restrictive list, but you don't need to remove all of these. You only need to minimize the ones that you're sensitive to. Monitor your intake and pay close attention to what you're most reactive to. For me, I'm particularly sensitive to gluten and a little bit sensitive to nightshades, so I just don't eat a lot of peppers and I don't have a lot of gluten. And I know everybody is all split about the gluten thing, but you can go research something called non-celiac gluten sensitivity, or NCGS. Dr. Tom O'Brien is basically the world authority on it. And the problem with American wheat specifically is that it's been so heavily modified or contaminated that it causes issues for many people. I've been to Europe, I've had the gluten there, no problem, but it's okay because it's different at a fundamental level. If you absolutely have to have your gluten, I recommend getting a supplement like Gluten Digest by Now Supplements. I take this before and after I get pizza about once a month. Further, on the gluten thing, I'm telling you that gluten is really just a wrapper a lot of times for real nutrition. Meat is nutritious, root vegetables are nutritious. Gluten is not delivering you any kind of special vitamins, except for butyrate, but that's a conversation for another day. Cut the useless inflammatory food wrapper and just eat the good stuff. I'm gonna leave you guys a link to a sheet that I have from FDN, simply called the General Healing Diet. It's very simple and it just eliminates all known inflammatory foods. It's even a little less restrictive than Whole30. You can download it, follow it, and let me know what you think. If you had to only remove one of these foods from the list, I would strongly recommend that it's gluten. Now, let's make a quick note about painkillers. If you haven't heard, long-term use of over-the-counter pain meds like Tylenol and stuff like that can be really quite toxic for your liver. That's why it's important to mix things up where you can. Personally, I don't have any OTC painkillers in the house because I just don't deal with a lot of pain, and there's so many other things that you can do before you resort to painkillers like creams and baths and stuff like that. You can use foam roller, massage gun, etc. Or you can use one of my favorite pain-killing supplements, which is called Theracurmin. Note, I have no financial interest in promoting Theracurmin or integrative therapeutics. I just like it. Now, you might have heard of other turmeric or curcumin supplements, but this one is special because it uses a highly absorbable form of curcumin called Theracurmin. According to their website, human clinical trials show that Theracurmin is over 27 more times bioavailable than a standard curcumin extract and is many times more bioavailable than other commercially available curcumin supplements. Also, Integrative Therapeutics is a Canadian brand, and Canadian brands have much more strict manufacturing rules than the US, which is another reason to trust this brand. You can think of Theracurmin a bit like a mild blood thinner that will help bring fresh blood all over the body, as well as directly act as an anti-inflammatory. If you're taking any other blood thinners, please talk to your doctor before throwing this in the mix. All that said, if you're a professional and you've got a show to crush, take what you need to take. As someone who's certified in all the natural health stuff, I'd recommend working on the diet stuff as much as possible and then swapping in something like this where you can. Painkillers of any type are great to have, but just keep in mind that they're only really a temporary band-aid for real underlying problems. Now let's talk about some really off the beaten path stuff that people will basically only talk about in like the biohacking circles and stuff like that. And the first thing is something called proteolytic enzymes. When you have a serious injury, scar tissue can form, and enzymes like serrapeptase and lumbrokinase can help break down the scar tissue and restore function. I like fibrenza and bolauke enzymes, but personally, I've only ever used them for kind of cleaning my blood. I don't have personal experience with using them for relieving injuries, but I've seen a lot of success stories with taking high-dose enzymes. Again, talk to your doctor, research forums, you do all this at your own risk. Second to enzymes is red light. There are a ton of studies showing benefits of specific wavelengths of red light. Red light is proven to speed wound healing, increase mitochondrial activity, reduce pain, and promote vasodilation, which means an increase of flesh blood flow to the site of application. What red light should you get? How long should you use it? Well, personally, I like the Gemba Red or the Juve brands, and there's lots of other good ones, but those are just kind of the most trusted and well-established ones in the space. And how long you use a red light is going to be dependent on the power or intensity of it. Just follow the directions that come with the product and you're probably good to go. But keep in mind that you can overuse red light, so be careful with it, and the wrist is a pretty small area. Now let's spend a little bit of time talking about computers, since most of us use those all day long and they can be a big source of wrist pain. First of all of these ergonomic and gaming chairs are complete bullshit. It's the same problem as using a brace. Whatever you brace all day will become weaker. Instead, as my chiropractor suggested, you should use a stool or saddle chair. I've tried kneeling chair and a saddle chair. Kneeling chairs kept me feeling kind of restrained, and saddle chairs were just kind of fiddly. If you have an untrained back, then it might be a little punishing to get used to a stool, and ideally this stool should have your legs at 90 degrees. Personally, I like it a little bit more open than that, and that works for me. And when you get a stool, don't just buy the cheapest one on Amazon. Just go all in, get the Earthlight brand stool, because every other seat I tried, I just ordered like 2 of them and they were rock hard and they sucked. The Earthlight one is the only one worth getting. Second, your monitor should be slightly below your eye level. If you work on a laptop, check Facebook Marketplace and get a secondary screen. They're super cheap. And for stands like this one right there, I like the Vivo brand on Amazon. If you want to get a standing desk, I have 2, and I only really use them some of the time at work. I don't use them up here in the studio area. VertDesk is really good, but very expensive. And then the other brand you want to look at is FlexiSpot. Personally, I think the FlexiSpot has a way better controller because it actually has memory, and it's way cheaper. Next up, we need to talk about keyboards. Most keyboards, just off the shelf, are what are called membrane keyboards, and they have a little rubber mat under them, and you have to press down a rubber dome in order to actuate a key. Some keyboards actually have significantly high activation forces, which can fatigue the wrists and fingers. Instead, I recommend mechanical keyboards. Mechanical keyboards have a significantly lower force per key press, and then they also have different kinds of switches so you can kind of customize them. Go to your local computer store, or Best Buy kind of sells a bunch of them now, and try out a few and see which ones you like. Personally, I really like Cherry MX Red switches. And then along with your keyboard, you should get a wrist rest so that your wrist isn't curled like this when you're typing. It should be a neutral kind of angle. I like the Graffiti brand on Amazon, and they're about like 15, 20 bucks for the wrist rest. And mechanical keyboards you can kind of get secondhand. They last forever. Check Marketplace for those, or go to any of the gaming brands, or Best Buy, Amazon. You'll find a bunch of them. Now there are also a lot of mini specialized ergo keyboards out there on the market. Some people love them. Personally, I've never explored them because I've never had that kind of extreme wrist pain. I like mechanical keyboards for now, but know that they're out there and try them if you're really having trouble. Next up, if you're a keyboard shortcut wizard like me, you should probably eliminate or reprogram any keyboard shortcuts that are causing a significant stretch. So Control-T, the new tab keybind, was killing my left hand, so I got a really cool simple Chrome extension called Keyboard Shortcuts, and I rebound the new tab shortcut to Control-Shift-A. Now instead of stretching like this, I just drop kind of these 3 fingers on Control-Shift-A, which are all really close, and my new tab opens. Last up, some people have trouble with their wrist because of computer mice, and the first thing I'd say to look at is adjusting your mouse sensitivity so that you don't have to strain your wrist if you're doing kind of fine movements all day, or you can get like one of those pen things. Second, I'd identify if you're more of a claw grip user or palm grip user. Claw grip users, like myself, use their fingers to control the mouse, while palm grip users rest their entire hand on the mouse and affect the mouse motion through their wrist like this and their arm. And the only reason I mention this is because there's different types of computer mice designed for different grips. Get one that works for you. I've also seen a lot of people like the trackballs, but I've also seen other people say that trackballs have you using your thumb all day, and that can cause issues too. So try out a bunch of different stuff and find what works for you. Now the last thing I want to talk about is supplements, and this is stuff that's different from all of the kind of very specific troubleshooting stuff that I mentioned earlier. And I want to talk about this last because people can come to rely on them instead of fixing the underlying problem. Really, they're just another tool in the toolbox to help you get on track. Strengthening and preventing injury is really the most important thing. All that said, I did want to give you guys some ideas on supplements that you can explore. For each of the following, I've read studies on the effectiveness of them, and I don't have personal experience with them just because I haven't had really extreme wrist pain. I've just done the wrist strengthening stuff, but here it is. Lastly, when it comes to supplements, I highly recommend searching symptoms or ingredients and then putting in PubMed at the end of your Google search and finding a study that mirrors your experience specifically, and then you can copy the dosing from that study. Because the reality is that most supplements will only say what they know is like perfectly safe on the bottle, but a lot of times you can go much, much more than that and get different and enhanced effects. In clinical situations, a lot of times they'll use much more of a particular ingredient. And if you do this, please work your way up slowly and then check the manufacturer website for additional details on the dosing. For an example, Fibrenza says take 2 capsules twice a day on the bottle, but if you read on their website, it says that you can take 4 capsules twice a day for 2 weeks as an activation dosage. And a bonus quick note, if you're searching for studies and you can't see the full thing, pop the link over into scihub.se and it'll let you access the full study most of the time. Glucosamine is one of the main components for your joint's synovial fluid. Think of it like oil for your joints. Glucosamine acts as an anti-inflammatory, specifically for the joints. Glucosamine and chondroitin sulfate, which are often combined, can actually stimulate the rebuilding of cartilage, according to one study I read. So if you're worried that aging has taken its toll on your joints, this could be a really great supplement to try. Next up is MSM. MSM has a long track record for helping relieve joint pain, and it's well tolerated by most individuals at dosages of 4 grams daily with few known mild side effects. While it's not a direct fix for joint pain, it can help kind of break away some of the pain so that you can get back to working your joints. And the last is collagen. There's lots of types of collagen out there. To sum it all up quickly, chicken collagen, which is type 2 collagen, is going to be the best for supporting cartilage. Chicken collagen is also a natural source of glucosamine and chondroitin, and I would caution you from buying cheap collagen as it can contain heavy metals, which can aggravate joint pain, among other things. Ancient Nutrition has previously had issues with heavy metals, but has since cleared things up. Great Lengths Wellness makes a joint collagen powder with MSM, and Vital Proteins is another clean brand that also makes a bone broth collagen powder. And as the last heads up, with regards to dosing, slamming the collagen can aggravate other symptoms for people who have histamine issues. If you don't know what that is, you'd know if you have them. To wrap this whole supplements section up, I want you to think about this. You need to destroy non-functional scar tissue with things like enzymes, then give your body the nutrition it needs to rebuild with things like glucosamine, chondroitin, collagen, etc. It's really just a theory of mine, but I suspect if you do them both at the same time, you'll get the best results. And a lot of times enzymes are taken on an empty stomach away from food, and then the things to rebuild are taken with food. So to sum it all up, today we went over the potential causes of wrist pain, the rest stage, the strengthening stage, and a whole bunch of other really cool tools you can use to avoid wrist pain. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love if you smash that subscribe button and let me know what you thought. If you're injured, take a break, see a chiropractor, and use supplements, ice, and braces to help get yourself back on track. Then once you're back on track, use the GyroBall or other wrist strengthening tools to build strength and help prevent further injury. When you're playing guitar, look for technique issues that are causing pain and eliminate them. If you're having long-term pain, you can experiment with things like proteolytic enzymes, red light, and more. The most important thing is to rest and then re-strengthen your wrists. Please see a medical professional or PT or hand doctor if you are still having issues. But I sincerely hope this stuff helps you and gives you some new ideas, and sources for most everything are listed below in case you want to read deeper. If you like this video, again, I'd love if you hit subscribe, it really helps the channel out. If there's something that you want to see me cover in future videos, comments are also a good place to do it too. All right, thanks so much for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.